On April 20th, 2023, a group of fishermen working off the eastern coast of Spain pulled up something in their nets that stopped them cold. 7 feet long, nearly 200 pounds, unmistakably a juvenile great white shark, alive, intact, and nowhere close to where any great white was supposed to be. They took photographs, they took video, they called the authorities, and then the scientists arrived, and a mystery that had been quietly accumulating since 1862 suddenly had a new, undeniable entry in its record. The Mediterranean is one of the most studied bodies of water on Earth. Surrounded by some of the oldest continuous civilizations in human history, it has been fished, mapped, sailed, and monitored for centuries. People know this sea. They have named nearly everything in it. And for most of the last several decades, the scientific consensus about great white sharks in the Mediterranean was essentially this: they don't really live here anymore. If one shows up, it's lost. It came through the Strait of Gibraltar by accident, and it'll eventually find its way back out. That consensus has now developed a very serious problem, and the fishermen off the coast of Spain didn't just catch a shark, they caught 160 years of evidence, finally crystallizing into something impossible to explain away. To understand why this single juvenile shark matters so much, you first need to understand what a ghost population actually is, and why the term is more unsettling than it sounds. A ghost population isn't a species that has gone extinct, it's a species that appears to be gone, but isn't. The individuals are still there, somewhere, but they appear so rarely in the observable record that researchers can't tell whether the sightings represent a surviving breeding population or just the occasional wanderer passing through. That distinction sounds academic. In conservation biology, it's the difference between a species that still has a future in a given region and one that is functionally already gone. For great white sharks in the Mediterranean, this question has been unresolved for a very long time. Historical records going back to 1862 documented their presence across the region, sightings off Spain, France, Italy, Malta, Greece, across the Adriatic. They were never abundant, but they were documented with enough regularity across enough decades to confirm they were genuinely part of this ecosystem. Then came the overfishing of tuna and the hunting of Mediterranean monk seals, the great white's primary prey, and the incidental capture of sharks in nets set for other species. Sightings collapsed. The assumption, gradually hardening into consensus, was that the sharks were effectively gone. But gone is different from extinct, and the records, frustratingly, kept coming in. Not often. Sometimes years passed between confirmed entries, but the data never fully stopped. A sighting here, a carcass there, a photograph occasionally credible enough to include in a scientific review. In Spanish waters alone, researchers had compiled 62 separate occurrences before the 2023 catch, including 9 indirect cases, some of them nothing more than characteristic bite marks on stranded sea turtles that only one species on Earth typically produces. The problem is that a sighting of an adult great white proves far less than most people assume. Adult great whites are famously wide-ranging animals, capable of crossing ocean basins in a single journey. An adult spotted in Mediterranean waters could theoretically be a visitor from the Atlantic that wandered in through Gibraltar and will wander back out without ever spending significant time in the region. A juvenile is a completely different story. Great white sharks are born large by fish standards, around 1.2 to 1.5 meters at birth, but they grow slowly, spending years in their natal region before they reach the size where they can take the larger prey adults hunt. A juvenile great white, measuring 2.1 meters, the size of the shark caught off Spain, is likely between 1 and 2 years old. Animals that age don't typically cross oceans, they stay near where they were born. The presence of a juvenile, confirmed by DNA testing, doesn't just prove that a great white was in Mediterranean waters, it suggests, compellingly, that the animal was produced in Mediterranean waters. that somewhere in this sea, a great white shark gave birth not very long ago. Dr. Joseph Carlos Baez, the lead researcher who published the study on the 2023 catch, was careful with his language in the way scientists always are. He wrote, "The occurrence of juvenile specimens raises the question whether active reproduction may be occurring in the region. Not proof, a question, but a question with a specific, important implication. The Mediterranean may not just be a transit corridor that occasionally receives wandering adults. It may still contain an active, breeding population, tiny, elusive, and almost invisible to monitoring, but biologically present and functionally alive." Then, on June 13, 2026, the mystery deepened. A team of scuba divers was removing abandoned fishing nets, what's called ghost gear, from a shipwreck in the Strait of Sicily between Tunisia and the southern tip of Italy. Standard marine conservation work, they were focused on the nets, not expecting anything unusual from the water around them. And then, a large adult great white shark appeared on their camera footage, moving calmly past the wreck and into the open water behind it. The footage is real. The shark is real. It is an adult genetically confirmed in the central Mediterranean, nowhere near the Strait of Gibraltar. Put the two records together, a juvenile off the Spanish coast in 2023 and an adult in the Strait of Sicily in 2026, and the picture that emerges is no longer a question of whether great whites are occasionally passing through. These animals appear to be distributed across the Mediterranean's length, from Spain to Sicily, and at least one of them was born here recently. So, where are they reproducing? Nobody knows. That's the part of this story that makes marine biologists genuinely uncomfortable. For a large apex predator to maintain even a minimal breeding population, it needs several things in close enough proximity: adequate prey, suitable water temperatures during pupping season, and enough undisturbed habitat for juvenile sharks to grow to maturity without being captured in fishing nets. The Mediterranean's prey base has been depleted for decades, but bluefin tuna populations have been slowly recovering under conservation measures since the early 2000s. Mediterranean monk seals, once nearly extinct across the region, have also been increasing in small, isolated populations. If these prey recoveries are reaching a threshold where they can once again support large apex predators, the sharks may be responding to that shift in ways nobody is tracking closely enough to notice. The 3.2 million-year isolation of Mediterranean great whites from their Atlantic relatives has produced something researchers describe as a genetically distinct lineage, not a separate species, but a population with its own evolutionary history, its own patterns, possibly its own behavioral adaptations to the specific conditions of an enclosed sea. If that lineage disappears, it doesn't get replaced by Atlantic animals swimming in. The genetic diversity, the accumulated adaptations, the ecological role that population has played in this sea for millions of years, all of it goes with it. What Dr. Baez wanted people to understand after publishing his findings goes beyond the science. He quoted H.P. Lovecraft's observation that the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. His point was the inverse, that knowledge reduces the fear, that understanding what these animals actually are and how they actually behave does more for conservation than the mythology built around them. The Mediterranean ghost shark is not a monster. It's a large, intelligent apex predator trying, against significant odds, to maintain its presence in a sea it has inhabited for millions of years. The ghost label says more about the limits of human observation than it says about the shark. The 2023 juvenile caught off Spain is now a specimen in a scientific collection. The adult, filmed in the Strait of Sicily in 2026, disappeared back into the blue water and was not seen again. Somewhere in this sea, which has held so much of human history, the great white sharks that have been part of its ecosystem for longer than our civilizations have existed are still moving through the water, rarely seen,
almost never studied, quietly persisting in numbers so small that a single accidental catch by a fishing boat is enough to make international news. The ghost is still here. We just don't know where it lives. If the stories hiding in the places we think we already understand are the kind you want more of, stick around and let me know in the comments. Does it change how you see the Mediterranean, one of the most famous bodies of water in the world, knowing that a population of great white sharks has been living in it, unseen and nearly untracked for all of recorded human history?